This is a podcast which does not shy away from difficult and vulnerable topics, and we ask you to take care of yourselves when you listen. The content is of an adult nature, and we do swear at times.
Welcome to the Autistic Licence podcast. I'm Leo in London.
I'm Shauna, and I'm Carrickfergus in Northern Ireland.
We invite you to listen in on our conversations as we experiment with unmasking in an autistic space. We talk about what it means to discover we're autistic as adults, especially with established careers as therapists. We want people to know that autistic therapists exist and to broaden the conversation about neurodiversity. You're so welcome to join us, whoever you are and wherever in the world you are. We hope you'll find something of interest and connection here.
But I've also enjoyed, more than I thought I would, the output so far of having guests on the podcast as well. Neither of us, I suppose, knew how that was going to go or what would come out of it. But so far, they've been really enjoyable, and they have been very different. And especially because, we've made a point of not, we do get people approaching us every now and then who might be quite high profile in various ways because they want to come on and maybe talk about a book or something or another podcast or whatever. And I don't have a problem. I'm not against that, but it's not what we were aiming for. We wanted just to give voice to people who found us and enjoy the things that I've just been talking about the podcast and want to be part of that. To go back to the band analogy, that would be like me wishing that I was the drummer in a particular band and obviously never having the opportunity. And I'm not saying the adoration part is equivalent, but to be able to actually join in with something that you found as a participant, I think that's a really nice thing to do. And I've enjoyed it a lot so far. Yeah,
well, if we were a band, I would want to play all the alternative venues and be part of that scene. I wouldn't want to be in the charts.
No. And you'd be in luck because that's generally what happens to 99.9% of people who go down that road, myself included, obviously. Yes, I've played lots of alternative venues and I've never been on top of the pops.
To 6 people.
Oh yeah, usually our mates. That was always the battle cry as you went on stage. Oh fuck, it's all our mates again.
That's basically what we're doing right now.
I don't think so. I don't think any of my mates listen to this.
Well, they're maybe better mates than the ones that you had before the podcast.
Well, all right. Bloody hell.
Hello, Leo's ex.
Yeah, I was going to say, no offence.
Well, they don't listen anyway.
That's true.
We did quite a lot of recording in December. We were quite
prolific.
I don't know why, and it wasn't even actually all of December. It was like about 2 weeks in December.
Yeah, it was.
And we recorded that episode.
Oh, the Woody episode.
But then, pretty quickly after that, we recorded episodes around Christmas and New Year that we just put out.
Yes.
Then we also went straight on to guest conversation.
That's it. Yeah.
And so you feel like there might be something to pick up.
There really is. I'm not overly emotional about it as much now. I'm getting used to the fact that he's not here anymore, but I'm really feeling the specific kind of whole of that HOLE of that relationship in my kind of day-to-day life. I really noticed not just that there's not a second, well, he was the first actually, but a second dog here because we have Wally as well. But that specifically him and specifically that relationship in that episode I talked about, the little routines, the very autistic nature on both sides as I saw it of our relationship. But more than that, actually, what I really notice now is I'll just say it as it comes into my head. The qualities of him as a person, as a being, as a personality that I related to in a very specific and wonderful way. And that is, it is lovely to also now have Molly, and Molly very much favours me for a lot of the time, not all the time, but for a lot of the time, and that's lovely. But she is, as all different beings are, a very different person, a very different personality, and the relationship, the nature of the relationship is very different. With Woody, he was very much felt like neurokin, actually, and that was a totally, on my part, effortless way of being with another creature. I'm really noticing that. I'm noticing that more than, having a pet that I'd had for a long time, or the little routines that were so regular and daily. I do find, actually, I'm very rarely in the garden now, which was certainly in the last kind of 6 months of his life. It was at least every 2 hours, 7 days a week. That's my kind of 3 months on feeling about it. It's not a replaceable thing, and I'm okay with that. I'm okay with the ending of that particular relationship in that particular flavour, but it's not as though it's just transferable onto the other dog or another dog at some point. It's just as it is with people. And we talked a lot in that episode about the relationship with creatures being, you made a specific series of points about it not being any different at all from relationships with people. It is the same.
It has the potential to be the same.
Yes.
So if it's a significant attachment, then it will be a significant loss.
Yes.
I think that's kind of what I was saying. Maybe it depended on the attachment quality to the creature, is kind of the word we're using here, that is lost. Making me think of that. When French people say, I miss you, they say, you are missing to me.
Oh, I never knew that. I never heard.
So it's like that's the flavour of it.
Oh,
you are missing to me rather than I miss you.
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, I like that a lot.
In my circle training, which is now done, actually, we had a wonderful training session, like a masterclass. I think it's Nikki Harrison. I'll put her link in the show notes. And Nikki specialises in grief circles and grief rituals. And it really kind of broadened out. I guess she said things that maybe in different ways I knew, but she brought them all together and was just talking about grief in all its dimensions, in all its ways, and as just a ongoing thing that we don't, like, there's kind of permissible things that it's allowed. That, we're kind of in our society allowed to grieve for a certain amount of time in a certain way, in a certain place. And, that actually it's not like that, it's much wider than that. Then where my mind goes is into all the other areas of life that it's not kind of acceptable to grieve. And that actually another thing is that in just the same way as often not me, because it's kind of my specialism in therapy, but a lot of people will downplay neglect and the absence of something in favour of the presence of something. So they will say, okay, you are traumatised because you were abused. And they will miss the fact that someone can be equally traumatised by the fact they were neglected, by the absence of something.
Yes.
Instead of the presence of, in this case, like maybe no violence, but actually nothing, no interaction. And I guess that what I wonder then is that for autistic people, perhaps we grieve the absence of something. So we grieve not having had something. And so I've no idea whether I spoke before. I think I did speak about how, potentially the reason why I haven't had stereotype grief reactions is because I haven't lost people to death who were significant to me.
That's right.
However, that does not mean that I haven't been through major therapeutic processes in which I have grieved the lack of having had people that I was attached to. And I work with people all the time with developmental trauma, and mostly that is with the people I seem to draw. It's similar to me. It's what they haven't had, not what they have had. And arguably what we do in therapy is we witness the grief of what someone has not had. Now, that's not going to be named as grief, and it's not going to necessarily be seen at a funeral in a similar way. It's still grief. It's a different type of grief. And I guess talking in that kind of vein, then, it joins this whole realm of disenfranchised grief where it's not validated, but it's very, very real. So like someone who grieves somebody they've had an affair with and no one knew about the affair, so they don't get any validation. Or like, for example, I'm estranged from my father and haven't seen him for 16 years, and yet no one views me as in the same way as they would if he had died 16 years ago.
Yes.
It's it's a very different sensitivity or lack thereof around the person when they're still living with loss, which could be permanent, in the same way as if someone had died. So yeah, I think there's a whole load of stuff there. And if there's anything you want to springboard off.
That is a really important expansion addition. And I wasn't specifically inviting you to expand on or add to. I was just kind of because you were saying you couldn't necessarily remember all the threads that we went through, and that was one of them. But that is incredibly important. And I loved you saying, autistic people and traumatized people both, will grieve the lack of something rather than the loss of something. And that's really, and you're right about, kind of the acceptability of the difference that we, about how we think of those people or how society, thinks about and treats those people. Yeah, you can't miss it. You never had it. It's not true. It's
you can miss what you've never had.
You
absolutely.
Certainly can if everybody else around you has. Then yes, that's really important.
Potentially, you grieve your whole life what you haven't had, and it's utterly unfair for that not to be noticed just because you don't cry at a funeral.
Yes.
Like, autistic people absolutely grieve.
We don't recognise that, and in a way, there's a lot more judgment around that version of grief. And maybe we don't think, a lot of people may not think of expressing it or feel suppressed in expressing it, or that it's not okay, because I don't know that it's recognised. That's not what came to my mind until you mentioned it, even though that's what we were talking about. And there's something maybe I can imagine about, there's a very autistic illustration of that, which is late diagnosis. When you realise, maybe for the first time, that you were suffering a great deal for most of your life in ways that you just didn't compute, because one, we might assume that that's everybody. Everybody finds that particular thing difficult, and if they're managing to do it, whatever it or the behavior is, then I'm just lazy, or I'm making too much of a fuss. And this is often what we're told as well. Those are two very common labels. When you realise, oh no, actually, I'm substantially different in some ways, and I did experience that as uncomfortable in a way that everybody else, if not everybody else, doesn't. And that then is grief, because then you think about, for me, 50, 55 years of, it could have been so much better or different. Well, no, better if I'd have known and understood and felt confident about it and been able to advocate for myself, instead of accepting external and internal criticism about, well, you're just not handling this well enough. Or, again, the common ones are you're stupid, or you're slow, or you're lazy, or you're make too much of a fuss, and, come on, pull yourself together, all of that stuff. That is a grief. And it's a grief that comes with anger, as well, resentment, because things could have been different. It's not necessarily about blame. It's not necessarily that was done to you on purpose. And also, I do accept that there is similar feelings, along with maybe shame and guilt, that those around you might then feel because they missed it, You bring up an autistic child without knowing that you're bringing up an autistic child, and then you find out decades later that's what it was, and that must be also very painful. But it's not my pain, but they're both losses.
Yes. Yeah, well, we're some people who choose to see it that way and can face that. I guess that it has been quite natural for me to identify and speak with people in a therapeutic context about grief in relation to what they didn't have, because that was very, very familiar to me in terms of the work that I had done prior to working with autistic people. Well, I mean, I always worked with autistic people, but working consciously with autistic people in relation to trauma and in relation to the lack and the something that hasn't happened. So it's like, anything that hasn't been sort of welcomed, and so anything in a person, like actually at its very core basic level, if you as a self have not been welcomed into the world, and your joy hasn't been acceptable, your sexuality hasn't been acceptable, your wildness, your whatever it is, your life force, or anything about you that hasn't been welcomed, then there's a grief about that. Yeah, there's so much lack in so many ways. Like I was, the R.E.M. song, Everybody Hurts. I was listening to that the other day, and I was thinking about when I used to listen to it when I was younger, and what did I feel like that was about then, and how did I associate that and imagine other people heard that and what was going on in their lives, and did I allow what was going on in my life to be validated, or was it supposed to be about people who had so-called bigger things going on than me? Exactly. Because at that time it would have been like, what have you got to be depressed about? But there's, and lots of people have so many things that have happened that have not happened so much in the world that makes us hurt. I don't know whether I'm off on a different strand than what you were on, but just No, you it's the same strand. It's the same, and even if it's not specifically about grief, it is about the two sides of the coin when we get late diagnosed or late self-diagnosed. And we make sense of it all, because on the one hand, it is this incredibly liberating thing. There is so much relief, even joy, in knowing that
it makes sense. There were really good reasons why we felt the way we felt and experienced the things that we experienced. And that a lot of the, to release ourselves from those stupid, lazy, oversensitive, whatever those labels were, is massively uplifting, and we can have this wonderful confidence. And yet simultaneously, grief, resentment, anger,
disappointment. Yeah.
That's a good one. Actually, that's underrated, isn't it?
It's really underrated.
As a strong emotional experience, disappointment. Gosh, and just waste. What
does it mean? What does disappointed mean?
Oh, that's good.
So
we know what appointed it. Oh, wow, I like this.
So if I am disappointed, what does that mean?
That sounds like. Okay. So one thing that comes to mind, which doesn't resonate with the current usage, now I want to go back and see what it originally meant. To be fired from a job would be to be disappointed. You're appointed to a role, and to be disappointed means to be removed from something that you were appointed. I love it. This
really fits. Because I think well, it fits because so this might be a bit out there for some people, but if our birthright as human beings is to be appointed as a human being with infinite worth and welcomed into a tribe and, have a community around us, have elders who affirm us and, speak us into being. If that's appointment, and then if we don't get that, we're going to be fucking disappointed because nobody has done that initiation and nobody has
just brilliant
appointed us. I think I'm still waiting to be appointed.
It's really wonderful.
In life, it's not really wonderful. I'm nearly 50. If somebody
I don't mean the situation is wonderful. I mean, no.
50, that would be great.
No, let me immediately reframe that. It's wonderful to think of the word properly and for it to make sense in a profound way, because it's a very mild thing to say, generally speaking, in modern English, isn't it? Disappointed is a bit. It's anger is strong. There are powerful emotions. Disappointment is really seen as a bit of a meh kind of.
It can be, but I do. I don't think that practically anybody that works with me actually listens to this. But if they did, they'd be like, "That's one of your catchphrases," because I do kind of say it's an underrated. I might have even said that to you. I do see it that way, but I've never done that. What does it mean? Kind of thing.
Okay.
But I do have this sense that disappointment is big, but it's only now that I've played with it. I think because you just give me an opportunity to, or it just slowed down, and I did that. Maybe if I usually say it to people I'm working with, they're not going to indulge me and go, "What do you mean by that?" They're just going to take or leave me saying it's underrated, whether they're going to go with that or.
But there's joy for me in taking that apart, as you can tell.
Well, we're both like that, so we could both. But yes, okay. So that's one meaning of appointed. Is there any other meanings of appointed?
Being me, I can tell you the etymology now. Disappoint is traced to the Middle English disappointen by way of the Old French desappointer. I may have pronounced that wrongly, of course. I don't know how to pronounce Old French. In literal meaning, it is to remove someone from office.
Yeah, okay, you're right.
It is the sense of general frustration. Its use in the sense of general frustration traces to the late 15th century, and it first appears recorded in English as an emotional state of dejection in the middle 18th century.
Well, it would make you dejected.
The way that you expanded on what I was at the time suggesting might be the root of it made a lot of sense, and that I'm sure that's exactly how it's evolved into an emotional. But I'm thinking expression.
Of that thing of dejected. Whenever I see dejected, I see eyes down. It's like, look at the ground. Don't don't see your worth. It's like cast down. There's something about cast down with that. And I'm not talking about eye contact here, but feeling dejected, then something goes along. Well, if you're initiated into something, you're welcomed into something, somehow you would raise your head up because you're worthy of something. It feels like it's to do with initiation.
That's great as well, because then that ties to the antonym, I suppose, which would, to let down. So to be disappointed is to be let down. Instead of to be raised up.
Exactly. The opposite of that is to be raised up. And that's what we need.
There you go. And a psychological definition. Disappointment is a subjective response related to anticipated rewards. So in other words, the unfulfilled potential, for example. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Which is also that then ties very closely to regret.
Potential just kind of still feels to me like it's linked to productivity.
Yes, I mean that in a much wider sense.
I know, but it could be seen as that, or like, the choices I didn't make, the missions I didn't complete, the things I did not do. Think that
did not achieve, particularly when we talk about potential, don't we? Yeah.
Yes. And I guess that I'm also wanting to note is something that's much more about our essence. And maybe this is like a masculine, feminine emphasis as well. But something about it's being called into being as a human.
Well, the other thing as well, this is turning into a really nice exploration of a very specific word and really expanding on it. And I enjoy that anyway. But, the other thing is there's such as a word, in the way that it is used, it is a very top down, it's a very parent to child word. There is even that cliche, isn't there?
Oh my goodness.
I'm not angry with you, I'm disappointed. And that is so much, in the cliche, that is so much more painful.
So much worse that your parent is disappointed.
If a parent figure or whatever is angry with you, it's kind of a little bit out of control, and it might be horrible, but it's kind of not. But to be disappointed, that is felt, thought through, calm, almost.
Yeah. And it's also, but it's like that. I'm proud of you, because I cannot abide when people talk about being proud of someone else. Like, I will not do it with Lana. What does it mean? Why are you doing that to someone else? And so I'll never say I'm proud of her in that kind of way. Yes. And if I'm talking to her, I will say, well, do you feel proud of yourself? Do you feel happy? If I ever use that word, but I don't like it, and I don't like people saying, it just does not work for me at all. But it feels like the same kind of thing.
I know exactly what you mean.
Being proud, being disappointed is like conferring that as if it's you. You know the way so there's somebody who drives me insane on my Facebook, and they're continually talking about how proud they are of their children, and that makes them feel like they must be doing something right. Mm-hmm. And it galls me like nothing else. You
talking about that part, I'm thinking I have another kind of slightly different angle of objection to that proud thing, which is, and it's similar actually to disappointment. They can both be incredibly wounding when especially a very young child seems to be coping very well with a horrible situation, and people praise them with pride for being strong, and the damage that can do. That it's not okay to say this is horrible and I'm really upset and this has hurt me. The praise comes from hiding that and from essentially masking. And then that makes that can cause all kinds of really horrible problems. But the same again with disappointment. In fact, I don't know why I haven't gone here immediately talking about disappointment, but that is so much of the feedback that I got in the first 20, 30 years of my life was that I was a disappointment. And I'm not saying people use that specific language, although some would have. But the idea that I'm not reaching potential.
Potential.
I'm not fulfilling all the things that I could do, and I now know why. But you're clear, from school, again, cliche stuff, but it happened to me all the time. You're clearly really bright. Why aren't you just doing the work? If you weren't so lazy, etc. And then different versions of that, and that is disappointment. And people really explicitly expressing that a lot, because I wasn't doing all that they could see that I could do, but they couldn't see why I couldn't. And neither could I. And neither could I.
Yes.
What did the inflatable headmaster say to the inflatable pupil of the inflatable school?
I don't know. I can't think. I need to imagine it. It's not just that
you've let me down or let the school down, but you've let yourself down.
If there was another word, and it wasn't about achievement, it was simply about someone saying, I think Shauna is wonderful. So that is like that more, parental in a non-strings attached kind of way. So if I say, my lovely daughter, Leilana, I am not meaning that she's lovely in something that she performs or something that how she behaves or anything other than that her existence in the world is the most amazing thing to me. And if I say it like that, that's what that is. And that's not associated in negative ways with pride for me. I didn't make her lovely. I'm not claiming or wanting anyone to hear me in that way, or I'm just not, that's not there. But there's something about, is there something deep in me, little Shauna that's never been initiated, that has these issues around, wanting someone to do something like that without the strings. Definitely don't want to be somebody's puppet or somebody to hold me up and say, I'm proud of you because I taught you all that you know, or something like that. Like that would just cause all my rankles and everything to come up. I wouldn't think it was right, but there's maybe something missing, and maybe that ties into the initiation and the being seen and the human being.
That points to person-centered, really. UPR. In simpler terms, unconditional love. Yes. And that's the point. Pride is conditional, or the meaning that the way that it's currently generally expressed. Disappointment is conditional. You did a thing or you didn't do a thing that disappointed me. And I've suddenly realised, well, if you are a disappointment, if somebody tells you that they are disappointed in you, they are saying that you have failed to be a source of pride.
For them.
And therefore we grieve the absence of being a source of pride.
If we ever wanted to be that, I don't think I would grieve that.
Maybe you don't now, but do we not at the fundamental beginnings of child development adapt to our caregivers? You need to please them so they feed and clothe and don't harm you. And that's quite fundamental to human experience for the vast majority of humans, which is why disappointment and pride are such powerful concepts. They're conditional and they're about other people. I mean, you can be disappointed in yourself, you can be proud of yourself, but again, that's only a comparison to how we've experienced making other people feel, initially the people who begin to bring us up. So there is this, I just think I suddenly saw that there really is a strong connection between those three things, because to fail at one of those is to is to then have this terrible internalized grief, which it's not okay to express because we don't, again, as we were saying at the beginning, we don't recognize the grief of the grief of absence.
Mm. You've just made me it just made me question are we all like that though? Or, do some of us just give up really, really early on that pleasing? Obviously some people, they will want to please their whole life.
Yeah.
And, some of us will just have shut all that off and gone our own way and please ourselves.
That is a grief though, isn't it? To give up.
Yeah.
And it's the grief of absence, and that can be often some form of neglect. It's also, in transactional analysis, when we talk about positive and negative strokes and the responses we can get for other people, then it's, we know that it's better, and I don't mean better as in healthy, I mean a better experience to get a negative stroke than to get no stroke at all. To have absolutely no feedback is devastating. There's nothing and that's a neglect, and that can certainly lead to what you're talking about, a hopelessness. Well, there's no point. Now, there's a positive outcome, arguably, that you're describing, which is I shall live for my own sake. I shall live on my own terms, and I'm not going to actually be massively pained by the absence of somebody else's pride or disappointment or whatever, that's not going to have an effect. And that's, arguably that's a very healthy way to live.
I think it's a very valid strategy, and it's a strategy that got me through and got a lot of the people that I see in therapy. This is going back to the developmental trauma thing that I talked about, and, that lack, whereby there's a wisdom in going, yeah, but a positive stroke, even if it's a negative one, as in it's, whatever you just said there, but say getting into trouble at school, you get attention, whether it's for something good or something bad, but getting attention
stroke is an attention, and it can be positive or negative. Yes, exactly.
It's the need. And that's why a lot of children play up or become a joker or whatever, because it's worse than just not being there.
Yeah, better than not being there.
For some people, better than being... For me, it was better to not be there. And my whole... I think I've talked in other episodes before way back about my invisibility cloak and how I got through and being under the radar. And, where literally people would swear I wasn't in a place, but I was in a place. Like it was just so... I was so capable of being invisible. And... interesting, Lana now talks about, people who are just there. And I think, well, at least you can see that they're there. What about the ones that are not actually visible? But it's not seen as a good thing to be just one of the ones that's just there, because you're not an actual choir singer or hockey player or, but it's still another strategy, isn't it? That at least those people are there.
It is. It's a strategy that, and I also now wonder then, because of a particular piece of language, whether that strategy for you of, well, I give up on that, that trying to get the response and I shall just live on my own terms. But I do wonder if there is quite a strong autistic element to that, because of this discomfort that so many of us talk about, not necessarily all the time, but in many circumstances. It's not about not being seen, it's about not being perceived. So many people say that, I just don't want to be perceived. It's not quite a don't exist stage. But there's a particular discomfort that I hear so many autists express about even just being perceived, or the need in certain situations or for certain periods of time to not do that, to not be perceived. And again, there are all kinds that we could go into. This is another episode probably, but the way that society looks upon that is a bad thing. A hermit, somebody who just locks themselves out, unsociable, or whatever. That doesn't, again, it's a judgment that makes that feel like a not okay choice to make for a lot of people. So I wonder then if that discomfort that can happen in an autistic experience to not being perceived makes it easy or even easier or even possible to do what you have done, what you had to do. That's what got you through. Whereas I think that might be, for a lot of people, unbearable to not be perceived, to not have a reaction to the, because of that. That's the upbringing that so many of us have, is that that's what you do. You affect other people. Yes. And you get a response, which is why, again, in TA, we say that a negative stroke is better than none at all. Because without that, we're just not connected and we don't exist. Yeah. But for a lot of autistic people, that might actually be a preference. That might not be true. Another way that TA can be reframed a little bit for an autistic experience of that rule. I need to write that down.
Yeah, well, but also if it's not safe to be perceived, then that strategy is going to feel like the only one that's viable.
We've been talking about my dog Woody a little bit, and talking about that other episode. And there's been another vet intervention today with my other dog, Molly, and just brought her back from the vets where she had to have a bunch of teeth out. Molly, like Woody, is a rescue dog, and she comes from a rescue shelter in Cairo in Egypt. So when she flew over here, what would it have been? Nearly 4 years ago. One thing about her was that, well, first of all, she is a little white fluff ball type of dog. So
she's a lap dog.
She's a lap dog. She really is. It is a breed that was bred as companion dogs. It's a breed called Coton de Touleur. It's called Coton because they have hair rather than fur. It's very, very fine. And Touleur was a place that now doesn't exist, but it's in Madagascar. And pirates apparently brought them over to Madagascar as their companion dogs 200 or 300 years ago, and they then became, until I think it was like really recent, like only 50 years ago, you were only allowed to own this particular breed if you were Madagascan royalty. And now there are many more of them. But the point about the coat is it gets very long, and it needs to be, if you're showing your dog, we just had Crufts here last week, if you're showing your dog, then they have to be groomed to the pet standard. Then they have hair that goes from the back all the way down to the floor. And the only bit that gets trimmed a little bit short is around their feet. I believe that's the kind of show standard. That's not practical. There really isn't. If you're ever going to go outside.
So brush their hair.
They need to be brushed, but
their hair straight right the way down. Is that what you're?
You would have to do that, and it would have to be spotlessly clean because they're mostly white. No, actually not all of them, but that one's white. But
and what's Crufts, the famous dog show?
Crufts is the big. I think internationally it's the biggest dog show.
I don't know.
It was on it was on TV on Channel 4 for 4 days last week.
Did you watch it?
Yeah, I watched bits of it. I love bits of it. This is a bit of a sidebar, isn't it? But there's a game which I always wanted to get Woody to play because I think he'd have been brilliant at it. A sport called flyball. And flyball is played by two teams of dogs of any breed, but they're fast runners. Most of them are quite little. And you have two parallel lanes, and you have all the dogs with their owners at one end, really winding them up and getting them really, really excited. It's very noisy. And it's when the gun fires or whatever it is for go, I think it's a buzzer, they have to run up the lane, and at the other end of the lane is a board with a tennis ball in it. They have to grab the tennis ball out, take it back down and drop it, and then the next dog goes and does the same thing, and they do it so it's a relay. It's a relay. And once the first team to finish is the winner, and it's brilliant spectator sport. It is great to watch. So I do watch that bit of Crufts because it's very funny, and it's very cute. Lovely. She would not be any good at that. She doesn't do fetch. Woody was obsessed by tennis balls, but Molly doesn't. Not interested at all. But you're right. She's a lap dog bred as a companion. They do tricks. and you don't know, if you, like, she hasn't, as far as I know, been trained. She might have been because she was 4 when she came to us. But they can, walk on 2 legs, which I've caught her doing. And once she was sat next to, I think I told you at the time, she was sat next to me on the sofa and got very, very excited about it and did a backflip.
Yeah, he did.
Raced up, jumped up, flipped over backwards and landed. And I thought, oh, you could do that, can you? Fantastic. She's done it 2 or 3 times, and so
why does nobody want them in Egypt now? Then,
well, I don't know what the situation is about. I don't know how it might be that lots of them are kept. Dogs generally, are kept very well by the people who have pets, and I don't know. We don't know her story. We don't know if she escaped or was abandoned, or I think that she was possibly hit by a motorbike or something, because first of all, when she came here, well, one, she'd been neglected for a long time because her fur had grown out and was completely matted.
Yeah.
It was totally matted and it needed a really drastic emergency cut. But the other thing is she's missing a whole bunch of teeth.
Yeah.
And so there's obviously been some kind of injury. That combined with the fact that she absolutely cowers and is terrified of the sound of motorbikes, particularly on a deep engine, but especially motorbikes. Yeah. So I don't know, bit of amateur clumsy detective work, but that could have been something.
Yeah.
Anyway, I mentioned missing teeth on a recent on a recent vet visit. They spotted that she had some trouble with a number of her teeth, and I think the enamel was really worn away, and possibly going to expose nerves, so she would have potentially been in a lot of pain at some point, and so she had to have a bunch of teeth removed today, and that's why she was at the vet's and had a general anaesthetic and lost 4 teeth. And has stitches in her gums. Right now, she's only been back for a couple of hours. And so she, for the last hour or so, has been quite groggy and a little bit stumbly. And it seems like she's waking up a little bit more now, but I'm guessing that she'll be in some discomfort from the work that she had done. But so just keeping an eye on her. Oh, can you hear her?
I can.
She just jumped as well. She just jumped up. What is there? He goes, come.
Oh, she got her energy back.
Well, I think she might be
a little bit.
Come here, sweetheart.
So, are we done for today, do you think?
Well, I think that Molly probably needs a bit of attention at the moment. So that seems a reasonable place to wind down, doesn't it?
Okay, the only thing that I'm thinking is that you haven't spoken about the recent publication that you were a part of. You might like to share some information with our listeners.
Yes, I would be delighted to. So a book has been published earlier this year called On Being an Autistic Therapist, and edited by Max Marno, and Max runs the Facebook group, the kind of international community of autistic counsellors and psychotherapists that Shauna and I both belong to, and it's how we first found each other in the first place. It's the springboard for this very podcast, of course. And a group of us over 2 years ago now decided that it would be perhaps a useful thing to do what this podcast does, to show that there are autistic therapists in the world, and to share a bit of what it might be like to be one and the kind of ways that we work. And so I think it's 23 of us from that group each wrote a chapter, and that book has now been published. And that's from PCCS Books, On Being an Authentic. Oh, well, actually, why not? On Being an Autistic Therapist.
Wonderful. Okay, lovely listeners. Thank you so much for being with us. We will speak to you soon.
Here comes the theme tune. See you next time. Bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you for listening to the Autistic License podcast. You can connect with us via Instagram, Facebook, YouTube at autisticlicense.com or by email at autisticlicense@gmail.com. We spell license LICENCE. We also have a Facebook community. You can search for Autistic License Shauna and Leo. Shauna spelled SIANA, or you can click on the link in the show notes.